Okay, so you've heard it. The Straits of Hormuz are open. Oops, the Straits of Hormuz are closed. Oh no. Don't worry, we've got enough oil and gas. Sorry, petrol's run out. You don't need to worry. I've got the numbers. I'm stable. Don't worry. Oops, he's dropped further in the polls. We're fixing the economy. That's okay. Oops, the economy's in dire straits. We've dropped further down the global economic measure. Who to listen to? What to believe? Both of today's readings direct us to pondering these questions. Who to listen to? What to believe? And I'm standing here this morning not confident at all. I really am preaching to myself, and I'm inviting you to come along for the journey, because I haven't got it all sorted. Our world is crowded with voices. Some voices tell us that our worth as humans depends on productivity, on how much we earn, what we create, how much we have, where we live. Some voices tell us we should be very afraid, and we should shape our values and our policies to defend ourselves. Some insist resources are scarce, and so we must guard what's ours and distrust the stranger who might want to take our stuff from us. Lock your doors, shut the gates, pull up the drawbridge, drop a bomb. Some tell us we should reject others, invade, make war, to protect ourselves and what's ours by right, we believe, or to protect our lifestyle. Some voices even tell us we deserve so much more than we have. And yet there are other voices that tell us, sell what you've got and share it. Walk away. So many voices. We hear these voices every day in debates about global security, about world order, about our national stability, about our oil reserves, about land, food, water, and in debates about how other sovereign nations should govern themselves. We even hear these voices right here at home in relation to housing and rough sleepers, in conversations about immigration, and in the way people talk about the poor, the vulnerable, those who seem different, and even about the earth herself. These voices claim authority, claim truth, claim they know what's best for the rest of us. Jesus names those with voices like this, voices of greed and power-mongering, voices focused on me and mine. He names them bluntly. He calls them thieves and bandits. It's difficult, as difficult for us today as it was for the people of John's day, 60 or 70 years after Jesus' death, to recognize the voices that we should listen to. The writer of John's Gospel is concerned to tell his audience who Jesus was and why his voice was a trustworthy voice and one they should listen to. He's shaping Jesus' identity for the people of his day. And in fact, he was so successful that it is John's Gospel which shapes, by and large, the Jesus that we know. At the time it was written, the early followers of Jesus had lived through enormous upheaval. And one of the most significant events, which you know, and still shaping their world at the time, was the destruction of the Second Temple during the Jewish-Roman War in the year 70. After that catastrophe, identity was a big issue. They were asking, who are we today? What marks us as different? It's easy to understand that Jewish communities were trying to figure out who they were without the temple as a reference point. They were rebuilding their identity, their worship, their social structures, and their future. And alongside the search for Jewish identity, early followers of Jesus, the Christ followers, who were themselves Jewish, of course, were increasingly finding themselves pushed to the margins of the emerging synagogue life that had taken over from the temple. The community to whom the gospel was addressed was likely to be this community of Christian Jews who were experiencing the identity tension very deeply. They were caught between the emerging power of the synagogue embracing their Jewish neighbours and their own embryonic Christian community that was gathering around the stories of Jesus and the Christ experience of post-Easter life. Who are we? They might have been asking. What are the points of difference? There would probably have been many voices in the wider community calling for allegiance to this group or that, to this way of thinking or that, not least the remnant of temple authorities struggling for prominence and authority again and negotiating with the Roman colonial overlords. So when the writer we call John tells stories about Jesus as the true shepherd, or the gate, or the source of life, he's not just offering an esoteric theology, a theoretical way of thinking for a small group. He's speaking into a moment of crisis, a moment of turmoil, when people were asking, who truly leads us now? Who can we trust? What gives us identity? It has been suggested that John, in retelling this parable, is indicating an alternative tradition that's arising among Jews themselves. That newly emerging way of thinking preaches that access to the divine, access to God, is possible independently, that is, without the religious practices of the temple or the mediation of the temple priests. This could have been reassuring in the context of the day, especially to Jewish Christians. John goes further in his shaping of Jesus, reminding the people that Jesus is the one who preached God, God who knows each by name, God who counts the hairs on their head. Jesus is the one whose voice should be listened to, who offers life. John uses a metaphorical form to present Jesus into the uncertainty as the one whose voice is still trustworthy and provides guidance in the way that leads to life. John is being practical and contextually relevant to the major current concern. The images John uses were well-established images drawn from life experience about the care of sheep. That would have been very familiar to the people not too far removed from the peasant life lived on the land. Paradoxically, however, the image of shepherd was used as a positive image to describe God kings, Moses and others who care for people, but actual shepherds were thought of as rather unscrupulous, smelly people who worked mainly at night in the hills among wild animals and wild people like bandits and outlaws, and who, because they were absent so much, didn't even look after their homes and families properly. And yet these unlikely people were responsible for the care of the sheep who were the livelihood of the family. One thing I wasn't aware of, I hadn't thought about it, but it seems highly relevant today, was that in the sheepfold, where the sheep were kept at night, there could be sheep from several flocks, from more than one shepherd. And in the morning, when it was time to get back to grazing, a shepherd would call his sheep, and only his flock would follow. The sheep were bonded to their shepherd and responded to his voice. You can tell I'm not a sheep farmer. But it made me think of our cat. Woof is our cat's name. In the village where we live, many people try calling Woof. Hey, Woof, Woof, they said. They're intrigued by his name. But he doesn't respond. And yet when I call, come Woof, he does, he comes when I call. He and I have a trusting relationship that's grown over the years we've been together. He's bonded to me and responds to my voice and to what I'm saying. The dogs don't come when I call Woof, just our little cat. And so John's story tells his hearers and us that Jesus, the metaphorical shepherd, is the one to whom his followers are bonded, the one whose voice they recognize and they respond to. But today, how do we discern from the many voices calling us to follow? How do we know which voice to respond to, which is the voice of Jesus, as it were? Well, obviously it's not the literal sound of his voice, the tone and the accent we hear that we respond to. Rather, and I want to suggest, it's the voice we hear that speaks congruently with the message of life and hope that undergirds all the words of wisdom we discern in the stories and sayings of Jesus. All of those big life-giving themes, all the life-changing, positive life-changing events that happen for people and communities when they engage with Jesus. All the incidents that are reminders of the power of loving others as yourself. All the examples of respectful engagement with difference. All the stories about peacemaking and justice seeking. These are the big themes that we need to listen for as we hear the various voices of our day. I'm sure we can call to mind many examples of thieves and bandits in our community and our world. People who do not enter dialogue on life and hope through consultation with communities and interested parties, through the processes of citizen-led democracy. These are the people in governments who take debate away from communities and enact in quiet moves or under emergency procedures and engagements, decisions and laws that could well have unintended negative consequences for swathes of populations. These are not the voices we're called by our faith to listen to and to follow. They are the strangers, the thieves and the bandits Jesus warns against. All these thousands of years later, it is still our discerning ear and our intuitive responses to life in all its fullness that are the means by which we recognize the voice we are called to follow today from among the clamour of many voices. And we come to church to hear stories of the one we call the Christ, and to be reminded over and over when we come to practice hearing why we must speak out again and again on the many injustices our world and its people experience, and why, in the face of the thieves and bandits who would rob us of all we hold dear, we dare to speak of life in all its fullness. We come to be reminded how and why we believe life in all its fullness can be the experience of all people. A caution, however. Confronting thieves and bandits, in whatever disguise you find them today, takes courage. That courage is best found in solidarity with the companions you find who respond to the same voice you do, the voice that calls you to life in all its fullness.